Well, no, the thing with Lefrak City, Starrett City, and a bunch of those big complexes, what is it, the one in the Bronx, Co-op City. You know,
what are you talking about? I don't remember the name. But...
Yeah, the Co-op City. It goes by income. Felix could have the same apartment that I have, but if I show more gross income than Felix gets a federal grant and his rent is actually less than mine. You know.
What about controlled rent?
No, you're talking about, you know, what they have like in Manhattan, where they have rent-controlled apartments where somebody's been living there for 50 years, paying $250 a month, when they could actually get $2,500 a month for that same apartment as soon as the person dies.
Right.
Well, that's because the original laws, and these people were...
I don't know, Mark. I don't know if you've ever been to, you know, the Bronx and saw those apartment complexes, or you've ever stepped foot in Lefrak City. But the people that live there, they have no intention on getting a job. They live on welfare, and that is their goal, is to get as much money out of the government as they possibly can, and they have as many kids as they can because they get more money.
Right.
Well,
Marc, obviously, you know, these programs have been you know, ripped off by people. They've been abused. You know, the changes have to be made. I could understand that. But there's also, you know, on the other side of the coin, there's certain spending that could be cut back also. You know, and what you really need is an independent consulting firm to come in and to, you know, I would hate to see Medicare or Medicaid for the elderly get hit. But you know that it's going to take a bite. Okay, it's going to take a hit. I would rather see, like you just pointed out, you know, families that have been from one generation to the next on public assistance. I'd like to see that come to an end.
Well, see, the Republicans are not against Medicaid because their mothers are getting old too. So they're okay with that. They're okay with Medicare. Obama's the one that cut them.
Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and they would cut those programs if they could.
Well, Obama already did. Unfortunately. No, don't say about the, you know. There's a couple of golden things that they don't touch because it affects them. You only do things that don't affect you. They're never going to do anything that will actually affect them. Tell them to get rid of their medical plans and go with Obamacare. There's not a Democrat that will do it or a Republican. Get rid of them.
But I just want to see the Democrats make changes to a lot of things. For example, when I'm going through an airport, and this is going to be really... When I'm going through an airport, I don't want the TSA inspector that's inspecting my passport to be from another country. I want the TSA inspector inspecting my passport to be an American citizen who's been properly trained, knows what they're looking for. I want to see them increase the salary wage for the TSA inspectors so that some of our military guys, when they come home, they can get those jobs. That's what I want to see happen. You know, I go through an airport and there's a girl inspecting me and she's from another country. She can barely speak English and she's got this TSA job. And I'm like, how the hell do you have this job? You know? I want to see those kind of changes take place. I want to see, you know, immigration reform. You want to come to this country? That's wonderful. You know what? I'm first generation. I have no problem with it. But there's no reason why you can't come to this country legally.
And hold on a second. We've got another caller. Who's in there? Who's calling in? Caller?
Hello, this is Q from Atlanta.
Oh, hi,
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I just have a question on what the lady just said, for the whole panel, really. So, just out of curiosity, what did you guys think of the Jimmy Carter presidency era economics? I'm not talking about personal president stuff, just economics for the country.
Well, as far as Jimmy Carter is concerned.
Well, it doesn't matter how long it was. I'm trying to get your view on something.
Jimmy Carter, the interest rates, if I recall, to buy homes was up like around 16 to 18%. Inflation was rising tremendously. You know, I like the man. Okay, I like Jimmy Carter. Okay, but he was dealing with problems just like Obama was fiscally, and that's why he was a one-term president. Really, the fact that I think Ronald Reagan basically was working on a deal to release those hostages while he was president-elect. So that isn't it a coincidence that on the day he was sworn in, the hostages were released after 444 days, which of course made Reagan seem like it was almost like he was the Gipper all over again. Okay.
Right. Well, the reason I asked is because in what she just said, that was Ronald Reagan's presidency. I think people, like I researched all the way back to Rockefeller saving the country via treasury. But, what people fail to understand, during Jimmy Carter's presidency, the debt was the lowest it's ever been. The deficit was the lowest it's ever been. And like you just said, the main people's complaint was housing. But as you all know, housing is going to go up and down every decade, irregardless of what really happens. I mean, housing is a popularity contest, basically. So wherever you want to live, your house in one location, 30 miles away in another location, the pricing is totally different. It can drop by 100,000 easily. So my point in what she said, and the reason I asked about Jimmy, just to see if you guys were aware that everything we wanted, we didn't have the legal program to the problem to the degree that we have until Reagan came around. You never heard the word inflation until Reagan came around. And I think this whole globalization thing that Reagan tried to do, which tripled the debt in 1 2-year term,
well, don't forget
is where a lot of the...
Don't forget trickle-down economics. That was his baby. His baby was trickle-down economics.
Right, but none of us ever heard the word inflation, even going all the way back to Taft, until Reagan came around spouting it. He's the one that convinced us that Jimmy had created inflation, but we just didn't see it in the books.
Well, let me ask you one question.
I think it's the biggest problem, and I'll get into the international trade aspect of it, and that is we have all these free trade agreements with all these countries, and if we go back through our history, you'll see that back in time when customs first began and they first started importing things, there was no federal deficit at all because duties and taxes covered the cost of the importation, and that money was actually used for all kinds of federal programs. When Reagan came into play and all these trade agreements started coming into play, and all these countries that we do business with now, that we import from them and duty-free, but when we want to export to them, we have to pay duties and taxes over there, and we lose our jobs to over there. So I agree. I think the globalization thing was probably one of the worst things that could have happened to this country. And unfortunately, my parents were the ones who were for it. They wanted it, and it turned out, for me, thank God, it's actually worked out to be a very good career. I mean, I have a great career in international trade, but the other side of it is sitting on that side of it and looking at it, I realize now all the terrible things that it's actually caused.
What do you think?
And let me just complete this thought real quick, and I'm going to share the mic. But that's my whole premise. It's like the globalization. When you and I pay 5 cents for a Coca-Cola and the guy in Thailand had to pay $4 for it, that's not our problem. You want a Coke, you got to buy it. And when unions were running everything, I just look at this whole jealousy thing that America and a fellow American will have for another American. It's gotten to the point where now we're eating at ourselves over those 30 years ago, as someone said, and it's come to roost. We have to get back to that thought process of made in America, and that's the only thing that's going to save it. NAFTA did away with that, and that's what Ross Perot said, don't do that, because you need that made in America theory. Otherwise, you'll start outsourcing yourself to death. But I'll be quiet and listen to what you guys say.
And you're right. Like I said, sitting on the side of, on the international trade side, looking at the whole picture, understanding the history and all of that, I agree with you. I think it is, we lost our jobs, we lost all of it, and Made in America has to come back. If it doesn't, I don't know what's going to happen to our children and our grandchildren. And
what do you think about the added value tax here?
We don't have an ADV tax.
No, what would you think of having one?
The VAT and the ADV taxes are in Europe for the most part. We don't have them here. If we had them here, we would go back to the duties and taxes program, which was very beneficial to this country. They would have to rewrite hundreds of trade agreements, which I actually have no problem with. I think we need to do it.
I agree. We got to make it more profitable to produce here. And
we have to make it worthwhile. And the whole nonsense about they outsource it to other countries because it's cheaper labor or whatever. That's not entirely true. I know people who are in Mexico that are managers that are at equal career height as I am, and they make sometimes more money than me, being paid by an American company for their maquiladora in Mexico. I know that when they bring the stuff back into the country, when you start adding all the transportation costs and everything else into it, if you really do the math, you're not really saving much money. You could pay an employee here $20, $30 an hour to manufacture that product and probably spend the same amount of money. So there's a big...
And that's what Ross Perot called it. He called it that little $2, $5 theory. He said when you break down that NAFTA thing, when he was arguing with Gore back in the day, he said you're basically saying that you don't want to pay an employee an extra $2 to $5 a week. You rather save that and send it over to the other country. But go ahead, what you were saying.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So you didn't pay that guy $2 or $5 more a week, but you paid the other country $10 more for the transportation and everything else. And I know being in the transportation international trade industry, a lot of people probably want to shoot me right now, but it's a fact.
Okay. Well, I think what I agree with both of you as far as putting on a duty or added value tax, something has got to be done to make us more competitive in the market here.
Well, I mean, and it's funny because in Europe they have the VAT tax, the value-added tax, and you may import something into, let's say, Great Britain, and it might have come from the U.S. and it may be duty-free, but you're still going to pay a VAT tax on it. Or if you want to import something into Canada, depending on which province you're going to import it into, you're going to pay a VAT tax depending on what that province's taxes are. So, it makes it more beneficial, it makes it more enticing for companies to manufacture in those countries on that soil because they make the money. And so the kicker for me is that we knew that 100 years ago. What happened? Why did we decide this? Who was the bright genius that thought that this was going to be the best thing, since bread?
Well, I looked at it from the side of, like I said earlier, Americans against Americans. When I was younger, I was a teamster, and I'll make this point very short, but I was a teamster, and what I got to learn was, hey, we got 2 days off because of unions, we got breaks because of union, and as I looked in the Rockefeller and Carnegie, they were working people to death. But my point is that somewhere along the line, this mentality came into play, and I talked to a couple of people